My mom kicked out my toxic stepsister instead of me, and then kicked me out of the house. But years later, I'm engaged, and my fiancé's company terminated a contract with my sister's husband. Now she blames me for it. I'm 26 years old, and I've been engaged to my fiancé Jeff, who's also 26, for 2 months now. I met him 4 years ago through a dating app, and we've been inseparable ever since. Jeff and I are soulmates. He's the only person in my life who has never let me down. My life hasn't been easy. My parents divorced when I was 2. My father left the family, and we never spoke again. Yes, he paid child support, but that was it. He never tried to meet me or find out how I was doing. My mom, who's now 48, honestly wasn't a great mother during my childhood either. She was more focused on her own life than on raising me. I was basically brought up by nannies and babysitters. As I grew older, it became obvious that she had me at quite a young age, and her priorities were completely different. She cared little about spending time with me. She preferred to be with friends or go on dates. She was a social butterfly, and she never seemed to have time for me. Even her work wasn't something she took seriously. She was a freelance artist, making decent money each month, but child support helped her take care of me. It's painful to say, but I'm almost certain that if it weren't for that money, she would have kicked me out a long time ago. She never had much attachment to me, and I mostly felt like she was just waiting for me to grow up and leave her alone. When I was about 13, she started dating my stepdad. His name was Matt. He was 50, and he had a daughter my age. Let's call her Jess. When they started dating, my mom brought them over to meet me for the first time. She asked me to behave perfectly and said it was very important to her. She had brought men home probably 1,000 times before, but she never cared how I behaved. Usually, she'd just tell me that we were having guests, and I took that as my cue to retreat to my room until they were gone. But this time, I could tell she was serious about this man. Otherwise, she wouldn't have cared about my behavior or even my presence in the house. When I first met Matt and his daughter, they were fairly nice to me, and the first meeting went well. I couldn't have imagined what would come afterward. Soon, Matt started coming over more often, and before long it felt like they had practically moved in with us. I didn't mind, so I didn't pay much attention, as long as I was allowed to live my own life. For a long time, nothing changed. They sort of lived at our place, and Jess would come over occasionally. Her mom was still in her life, so she spent half the month with her. At first, they either treated me normally or ignored me, and I was fine with that because I didn't really care about them. All I wanted was peace and quiet, and for a while, I had it. But then they decided to officially move in. I still wouldn't have cared, until my mom told me I'd have to share my room with my stepsister. I stood my ground and said I wouldn't do it because it was my room. It had always been mine, the only place in the house where I could feel safe and calm. It was my space, and I wasn't about to sacrifice my freedom for someone I barely knew. When I told my mom I wouldn't share, we had a huge argument. She threatened to kick me out if I didn't do what she wanted. I was only 14 at the time, but I already knew the law. I understood that my mom wasn't someone I could trust, so I had to be prepared. Common sense told me she couldn't actually kick me out before I turned 18, or she'd have legal trouble. I told her I knew she was bluffing. She was angry but had no choice but to let me keep my room. She ended up renovating the basement into a room for Jess. It wasn't a bad place, just not as cozy as mine. My mom really did try to decorate it and make it livable. And in the end, it looked as good as any other room in the house. So I couldn't understand why it was such a big deal. But from that moment on, Jess started to hate me. Maybe it was because, on the day she moved in, my mom gave them a tour of the house and made a point of saying that Jess had to live in the basement because I refused to share my room. I still don't know why she said that. Maybe she wanted me to feel guilty, but all it did was make me embarrassed for her, not for myself. Or maybe she just liked creating drama and wanted Jess to know I refused, so that problems between us were inevitable. And my mom was right. Jess never let it go. She began treating me like an enemy. Half the month she still stayed at her mom's, but the days she spent with us were pure hell for me. Jess was a real menace and seemed to target me on purpose. She constantly acted rude and made awful remarks to my face. Once, she told me my dad left my mom because of me, and then laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. She often mocked my looks because I was a bit chubby at the time, and she bullied me for no reason. At school, Jess had her own mean girl group, and she never missed a chance to make fun of me in front of them. Before this, she and her friends would just ignore me, which was much better than being her enemy. The saddest part was that I had never done anything to her. She hated me simply because I wouldn't share my room. Such a stupid reason to try to ruin someone's life. My room was my safe place, and with a mom like mine, no one could blame me for wanting some personal space. If Jess had at least tried to get to know me, maybe I would have shared my room. But she was a stranger to me, and I didn't feel comfortable giving up my freedom for her. I never complained to my mom or Matt about Jess's behavior. They already knew and didn't care. They could have let her bully me my whole life and just turned a blind eye, because to them, I meant nothing. So all I could do was put up with it and let Jess walk all over me. Sometimes I tried to stand up for myself, but that only made things worse. Then our parents would get involved, and somehow I'd end up being the one punished. Jess could cry on command and avoid any consequences, but I couldn't fake tears or manipulate like she could. So all the blame always fell on me, and I was told I should start treating Jess like a sister, while she got away with everything. I hated my life. So when, right before my 18th birthday, I finally got kicked out, I actually felt more relief than anything else. I had endured my family's insanity for years, and every year it only got worse. Jess kept being a nightmare, and our parents kept supporting her no matter what. Over the years, she even managed to turn almost our entire class against me, leaving me with just a couple of friends who still wanted to talk to me. Everyone else hated me simply because Jess did, and that was enough for them. It destroyed my mental health. I started gaining a lot of weight because I stress ate, and my appearance suffered. I became overweight, had skin problems, my hair looked awful. I was also struggling in school, so I not only looked bad, but also seemed stupid to everyone. My life had nothing good in it. I hit rock bottom. At home, things weren't better. I still had to deal with Jess, my mom, and my stepdad. My mom became even more unbearable and constantly compared me to Jess, despite knowing Jess had made my life a nightmare. Before she married Matt and they moved in, things were bad, but not that bad. It was unpleasant that my mom didn't care about me, but after the marriage, things went from bad to awful. She stopped just ignoring me and started actively making me feel worthless. It was clear that Jess was the daughter my mom had always dreamed of, but fate had given her me instead. I knew both of them wished I didn't exist, and honestly, I felt the same way. My mom and Jess hated me, and Matt didn't care. I had no other family. My grandparents had no contact with us, and I'd never met my dad's side. I had nowhere to go, and I was too embarrassed to ask friends for help, so I stayed with my mom just to have a roof over my head and food to eat, at least until I turned 18. But a couple of weeks before my 18th birthday, something happened that got me kicked out that very day. It was a weekend, and I still remember it like it was yesterday because it was one of the most traumatic and stressful days of my life. At the time, Jess and I had just graduated high school. She had a friend whose brother was a senior in college, and Jess was dating him, so she and her friend often hung out with his group of friends who were a bit older than us. I knew what they were doing there, but I didn't see the point of telling our parents. With my luck, it would just backfire on me. So I never said a word about Jess picking up bad habits. I never got into any of that because, first of all, I never had such cool friends who could get alcohol, cigarettes, or anything else. Secondly, I was already struggling with excess weight and bad grades. Adding bad habits to that was the last thing I wanted. I already had enough problems. But that day, I apparently forgot to lock my room before I went to take a shower. The next moment, I heard loud knocking on the bathroom door, and my mom was shouting, demanding that I come out immediately. I hurried to get dressed to see what had happened. When I came out, my mom, Matt, and Jess were already waiting for me in my room with very serious faces. My mom pulled out a bunch of empty beer bottles from under my bed, and then, even worse, a big bag with something far more serious. I knew for sure it wasn't mine, and Jess knew it too. But my parents didn't know that. It seemed she had. Somehow planted it in my room while I was gone, and then told my mom about it. Everyone started yelling at me, calling me awful. My mom said I was a complete disappointment. She complained that I only ate their food, called me useless, and insisted I would never achieve anything in life. She added that I would just live off them forever and waste their money. I tried several times to explain that it wasn't mine, and that I didn't even know how it ended up in my room, but she didn't believe me. She completely lost it when I suggested Jess might have planted it to set me up. My mom started shouting that I had always been jealous of Jess and would never be as good as her, and that was why I was trying to blame her. I was already crying like crazy, but even that didn't stop her. She kept yelling at me. After a while, she went quiet and said I had to leave. I didn't understand what she meant and asked where I should go. She replied that she didn't care where, but she didn't want to see me in the house anymore because she was sick of me. When I said I wasn't going anywhere, she threatened to call the police since I was almost 18. She said the police would take accusations of possessing illegal substances very seriously. She told me she didn't want me living in her house and draining her money anymore. She said I would have to take care of myself from now on because she was done pretending to be a happy family with someone who didn't deserve it. I begged my mom not to kick me out because, although I wanted to leave, I knew I had nowhere to go and not enough money. But she didn't care. She said if I didn't get out that day, she really would call the police and turn me in. I was shocked by her cruelty. What stunned me even more was that neither Matt nor Jess even tried to speak up. They just kept going about their business as if nothing was happening. After long tears and pleading, I realized I had no other choice. I started packing my things because between being arrested for possession and living on the streets, I'd rather choose the latter. By evening, I was done packing. When I left the house, no one said goodbye to me, and I didn't look back either. I went to a park and sat on a bench for a couple of hours, but then it got very cold. So I decided to go to my friend's house, hoping she'd let me stay the night. I headed to my best friend M's place and asked if I could stay for a couple of days. She already knew how my parents treated me, so I didn't have to explain much. I told her what had happened that day, and she was shocked. M said her parents could help me if I let them. I had always asked her not to tell anyone, even her family, about how my parents treated me because I wasn't sure people would believe me, and I felt embarrassed to share such personal things. But that day, she insisted I tell her parents everything. They were just as shocked as she was. They called my mom and tried to talk to her, but it didn't work. My mom was rude, and they realized talking wouldn't change anything. Then, they did something I'll always be grateful for. They told me I could live with them for as long as I needed, and they'd support me. They were wealthy people, so money wasn't an issue, and M loved me, so she was happy to share her room with me. I spent the next few years living with them and attending a local college, the only one that accepted me because of my poor grades. I started working and saving money to eventually get my own place, but M's parents made sure I didn't feel pressured to move out. They went out of their way to make me feel comfortable. About 3 years ago, I finally saved enough to move out. I was proud of myself and incredibly grateful to M and her parents. Without them, I wouldn't have made it. Even on the day I moved, they helped me settle into my new apartment and told me I could always come back, whether just to visit or to live, if I ever needed to. That moment was a turning point in my life. By then, I had lost a lot of weight. My health had improved, and I felt and looked so much better. I was also earning enough to support myself. After working hard on myself, I decided to start dating because I eventually wanted to get married and knew it was time to look for a partner. Before meeting Jeff, I dated a few guys, but things ended quickly before they even began. When I met Jeff, I finally understood why, because he and I were meant for each other and the others had just been random encounters. When we started dating, I didn't know he was wealthy or the heir to his father's company. I liked him because he was funny, handsome, and seemed to genuinely care about me. A few months into our relationship, he told me about his family, and I learned they owned a chain of restaurants he would inherit in a couple of years when his father retired. Many people might think learning about his wealth would change something for me, but honestly, I still saw him as the same person I knew before. That information didn't affect my feelings. I loved him just as much as before. A year into our relationship, we moved in together. A couple of months before that, he introduced me to his family. They all liked me and we got along well. Everything was perfect, and recently, when he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. We've been engaged for 2 months now, and everything is going great. But 2 weeks ago, I got a letter from Jess. We hadn't spoken in almost 8 years, and since being kicked out, I hadn't heard from my family at all. I didn't understand why she suddenly wanted to write to me. Enough time had passed that neither of us seemed to care about reconnecting. But when I read the letter, I realized she wanted to apologize for everything that happened in the past and admit she had treated me terribly. That shocked me. She confessed that she had planted that stuff in my room to get me kicked out because she hated me for no reason. I had no idea why she was admitting this after so many years, but I immediately felt something was off. The timing was suspicious. She must have found out about my engagement. I had posted about it on social media, and since we went to the same school, someone probably told her. It all seemed too coincidental, so I decided to dig deeper. In the process, I learned that Jess's husband owns a company that supplies plastic, containers, and other takeout items to Jeff's family's restaurants. That was easy to find out. I just made a fake profile and looked through her accounts. From her photos, I found her husband's profile, where he described his work in detail. I already knew a lot about Jeff's family business since we were planning to run it together when his father retired, and I was learning how to manage it. When I realized her husband was the supplier Jeff's restaurants used, I told Jeff right away. For the past several years, I had avoided thinking about my past life. I didn't follow my family on social media and asked friends not to tell me news about them. I didn't even know Jess had been married for years. But once I found out her husband worked with Jeff's restaurants, we decided to cut ties with him. The supplies were already too expensive, and more importantly, I couldn't let myself have any connection to that woman again, even in business matters. Jeff also said that the quality of her husband's products had noticeably declined over the years. They had already been considering switching suppliers and were in talks with another company offering lower prices and better products. Last week, a couple of days after receiving Jess's letter, Jeff met with her husband and ended the contract. But for some reason, Jess decided I had done it just to get revenge and began accusing me in social media posts. We hadn't spoken in nearly 10 years, yet she still thought I was holding a grudge. Honestly, I was. But that wasn't the main reason her husband lost the contract. A few days ago, she posted that they were already losing clients one by one, and that this contract termination was the last straw. She claimed I did it purely out of spite and called it extremely unprofessional on our part. She even tagged our restaurant's Facebook page in her post, turning the whole thing into chaos. In her post, she also wrote that because of this, she and her husband keep losing clients. While I admit part of it was personal, most of the decision was based on professional reasons. I don't think Jeff and his father would have cut ties with her husband just because I said so. Still, I do feel a little sorry for her. Update 1. Jeff discussed the situation with his father's lawyers, and his father believes that we acted correctly. Therefore, we intend to proceed through the court and demand that they remove their post. We are also filing a defamation lawsuit because her husband sells low-quality products at inflated prices. If we can find a more profitable offer, it's obvious we will switch to another supplier. The fact that Jeff turned out to be married to the owner of this company is just a coincidence. Instead of focusing on improving her business, she decided to throw dirt at us on social media, trying to slander us. It's just ridiculous that I even allowed myself to feel pity for her after everything she did to me. Update 2. Jeff and his father filed a defamation lawsuit against Jess and her husband. A couple of days ago, in a week, we have a meeting with the court-appointed mediator. In the meantime, my mom decided to take the side of her poor little stepdaughter. It feels so absurd, as if I'm back in my school years. But luckily, that's not the case. Now, I can simply ignore them. Update 3. We won the defamation case. It turned out to be quite easy because Jeff's father's lawyers are real sharks, and they literally crushed the opponent. Jess and her husband had to pay compensation for their actions. Now it's all behind us, and Jeff and I can finally focus on planning our wedding. I'm looking forward to the moment I marry Jeff, the man of my dreams. So, this is where the story ends. Be sure to write in the comments what you think about it. Subscribe, leave a like, and good luck.